This one's called completing the square. I always remember having to like remind myself how to do this in college because like you won't do it for a long time maybe, and then all of a sudden in college, like I was like, I have to do that again. I totally forgot. All right, so what this means when it says completing the square is if you get an example like this, and go ahead and write it down, x squared plus 6x plus 4 equals 0. So we really want to be able to solve these problems like that one we just did, where it was a perfect square trinomial on one side, we could factor it, and then we just square root each side. Is this a perfect square trinomial? No, because the square root of x squared is x, the square root of 4 is 2, 2 times x is 2x, times 2 is 4x. So it's not a perfect square trinomial. So that's like sad, okay? It's not a perfect square trinomial. Sad face. So we can't solve it that way like we did before, yeah? Yeah, you could do that, but nothing works, does it? Yeah, yeah? Where would you put it? But then what would happen when you square rooted that other side? You know? That is a good idea, but then when you square root it, it's going to be all messed up. So one way we can fix this problem is called completing the square. So here is what we're going to do. So the first step is we want to get it, and I'm going to write the steps over here and do it over here. So these are the steps for completing the square. So right now, this is an ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 form. Your first step for completing the square is you want to get it to ax squared plus bx equals c form. So I'll show you how to do that. We're going to get it to ax squared plus bx equals c form. So that means we want the term with the x squared and the x on one side, and then just the regular number should be by itself on the other side. So we want to move this 4 to be over here. That's the first step. How should I do that? Subtract 4. So this is step 1. We're going to do subtract 4, and we are left with x squared plus 6x equals negative 4. So that is step 1. You'll have to memorize this. But you'll do it so often that it won't really be like memorizing. Okay, so then what we're going to do, I'm going to do it first and then write the step out over here. So the second step is we want to make this side a perfect square trinomial. So who can tell me what number do I want right here? I want it to be x squared plus 6x plus something. Does 9 work? X, 9. The square root of x is x. The square root of 9 is 3. Is 2 times this 6x? Yeah, so we're going to add a 9 here. Okay, now we can't just do that. What do you think we could do to even it out? Add 9 on the other side. So we're going to add the 9 on this side, and we're going to add the 9 to this side. So I just added 9 to each side. I mean, you could. They would just have to have 3 things all equal to each other. Yeah. So this is going to make this a perfect square trinomial, right? So the way we can always figure out what that number is, well, didn't we want this number, we wanted it so that if we took the square root of it, it ends up being half of this number, right? Right? If we take the square root of this, it should end up being half of this. So let's go backwards. To figure out what this number is, we take our b, which is 6, cut it in half. What's that? 3, and then you square it. What's that? So that's the number we added. So here's your step 2. you're going to add whatever b cut in half is. So you take your b value, that's the number right in front of the x, that's your b. You take that number, you cut it in half, and then you square it. And you add that to each side. And we'll do a bunch of these so you guys will just see it over and over. So you take the number that's in front of x, that's your b, you cut it in half, you square it, and you add that to each side. Okay, so then our third step is we're just going to factor and solve this like normal. So what is this factored? X plus 3 squared, right? 3 because that's the square root of this number, equals, what's on this side now? 5. Negative 4 plus 9 is 5. So our third step is to factor it, and then we'll go ahead and solve like we learned last week. And from here to here is something we learned a while back. So now, what do I do to each side to solve this? Square root it. So square root and square cancel each other out. We're left with x plus 3 equals what? No. Yeah, plus or minus root 5. So anytime you take the square root, put the plus minus. Then, how do we get rid of that 3? Yeah. We're going to subtract 3 from each side. So we're left with x equals, I like to write it with this number first, negative 3 plus or minus root 5. That's it. It's not too bad. So let's just practice the part where we had to figure out what number to add. Let's just practice that a few times. Is it okay if I go? Okay, so on this one, the instruction is, this is the first example, replace the blanks with constants to form the equation, to form a true equation. Replace the blanks with constants to form a true equation, and then we'll do 3 of them here. Yeah, this will always be a plus because to get it, you had to square something, so it'll always be positive. Alright, so get those written down. There are a total of 4 examples today. This is the first one. Okay, ready? Alright, so I started off easy and they get harder. So the first one's easy because this is an even whole number. So to find what this number is, we take our b, this is our b value, we cut it in half. So what's 14 cut in half? 7. So we cut it in half, and then what do we do to it? Square it. So we take that, we square it. What is that? 49. So that's the number that goes right there. Take your middle number, cut it in half, square it. That's what goes right there. So then, when you're figuring out what it factors to, you've got a choice here. You'd basically just take either the square root of this or half of this. So what was half of 14? 7. So this 7 is what goes right there. Okay, so now let's do fractions, and this should not be scary. All right, so on this one, we've got a minus here. We don't really have to worry about the negative to do this because we know it's going to turn into a positive when we square it. So we can just worry about 5 if you want. So here's our b. We're going to take 5, we cut it in half, and we're not going to do 2.5. We're just going to do a fraction, okay? It'll be so much better. So we take 5, we cut it in half, it's 5 halves. And then we're going to square it. This is not working today. All right, so what's 5 halves squared? Give me as a fraction. 25 fourths. 5 squared is 25. 2 squared is 4. See, isn't that easier than doing 2.5 squared? So this is 25 fourths. And just leave it improper. There's no reason to make it a mixed number. Just leave it improper. So then what goes right here? 5 halves. Whatever this number cut in half is always goes right there when we factor it. Okay, so you guys we should be able to do this one too. So here's my b, 3/4. I'm going to cut it in half. We know how to do that, right? You're just multiplying it by a half. What's 3/4 cut in half? 3/8. Good. 3/8, and then we're going to square it. So we take this, we cut it in half, which is the same as multiplying by a half. We're going to square it, and what's that? 9/64. 9/64. It's so much better than whatever that decimal would be.